Welcome to the Start With Who podcast, where we explore how understanding who you are shapes the way you lead, work, and live. I'm Shannon with Newton Institute, and I'll be joined by Rick Newton as we bring reflective conversations, real-world stories, and practical insights to help you start with who in every area of life. Our goal is to help you discover your unique design and elevate your life, leadership, and legacy. It's great to have you with us. Let's get started with today's episode. Rick, it's good to be on with you here. This is our first podcast. Can you believe we finally made it?
Yeah, this has been years in the making, hasn't it, Joe? I mean, we've been working in and through the Newton Institute for the last 10 years and the Start With Who message for the last 5 years. We've been wanting to do this podcast for at least the last year, so it's exciting to actually get this started.
Yeah, time flies when you're doing good stuff. And I guess, this is called the Start With Who podcast. Maybe even before we talk about what it means to start with who, how we describe all of that, I'd love for you to just tell the audience about yourself for those who maybe don't know you.
Yeah, so let me start maybe with some personal stuff. I am married to my wife, Terry. We just celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary. I have 5 children. They've all graduated from college, ranging in ages right now from 39 to 24, 4 of whom are married. We have 11 grandchildren, and as I always like to say, and counting, because we anticipate at least 10 more on the way. I live in a small rural community about 40 miles southwest of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm actively involved in the community, a lot of community revitalization efforts. My passions is mentoring the next generation of entrepreneurs in this area. Let's see, and my family all live in this same area as well. So it's quite the blessing to have all of them close by. I guess from an education standpoint, and I only bring this up because the journey, as we start exploring what Start With Who is and how that principle got developed in my own life, it really started through the education process. But just by way of background, I have a double major, undergrad in chemical engineering and computer science, and I later added an MBA from the University of Pittsburgh. And out of college, I worked for one of the largest consulting firms in the world, Accenture. I did mostly systems development and integration, what's called systems integration work across a broad range of industries while I was with them. I then joined the IT department of one of our clients, which was a fast-growing local company, where I did a lot of project management, both on the business and the IT side. And I eventually climbed the corporate ladder, I guess you could say, and eventually managed the entire IT department before I left. And from there, I joined a small boutique consulting firm, and we specialized in, now these are some buzzwords or whatever, ERP, CRM, SCM, enterprise resource planning, customer relationship management, supply chain management software. This is packaged software that we would implement at large Fortune 1000, Fortune 500 companies. And after that, I started my own consulting company that was called Newton Consulting. And after years of growth and a few crucibles, which I'm sure we'll explore in coming episodes, I was rebranded Aspirant. And after a number of years, that company was purchased by a European-based company called Wavestone, and that was just 2 years ago. And so now my full-time role, my full-time job is with the Newton Institute. And it was during that 20-year journey, we had a couple of international subsidiaries in the consulting company in Canada and the UK. We spun out a couple of other companies, one of which, as I already mentioned, was Newton Institute. I can provide some background on Newton Institute, or do you want to do that yourself, Joe?
No, let's hear it from you, because I think it would be really interesting to hear. I mean, as you said, we'll hear a lot more over the course of these episodes, but I think, paint a little bit of a picture of how you see the Newton Institute. Yeah.
So I guess technically, and I don't have this elevator pitch down quite yet, but technically, exactly.
The new end of season 1, we'll have a really good one.
Yeah, there we go. Comments are welcome. Right. Community sourced elevator pitch. So the Newton Institute is technically a leadership development company, but our focus is both broader in terms of not only touching leaders, but also teams and organizations as well. But our focus is also deeper. We're not here to introduce a brand new leadership framework or team productivity framework or organizational flourishing framework. So we go deeper, focusing on what we believe is really a missing piece to flourishing leaders, teams, and organizations, which is this principle that we'll explore called starting with who. And through the Newton Institute, we've created a platform of tools and programs that were forged really through this decades-long consulting and entrepreneurial journey that I've been on. And I like to say that the tools that we're creating are the tools I wish I had when I first started Newton Consulting 25 years ago.
Yeah, and I think that's really meaningful for those who either are right at the beginning of their journey, saying, "Man, I want to learn from Rick, or I want to learn from these. What are these tools that you wish you had?" But also for those who may be in the middle of their career, or even looking towards the end of the career, it's so important to think about. There are valuable tools, there are valuable lessons that different people have learned along the way. And I appreciate your desire to want to share those with other people.
Yeah, I guess in that way, I think of myself, some people might want to call me a thought leader because I think there are some innovative things that we've developed, but I really view myself as a thought practitioner. And, I observe and develop, I have observed and I've developed these principles through experience, learning what works and what doesn't work, with failure probably being the best teacher that I've had throughout my career. But as I slowly learned to incorporate the Start With Who approach in my business and in numerous consulting and coaching engagements, I also learned what worked. And I learned that starting with who is often an overlooked yet foundational piece of the puzzle that's required for leadership, team, and organizational effectiveness.
Yeah, and so I guess, hopefully for those listening, the next question isn't too much of a surprise, but what is Start With Who? How do you describe that? What do you mean by it? How have you found it to be effective?
So one of the things that we often equate is that when we talk about starting with who, we're really talking about the principle of design. And so I'll explore that a little bit here. So what we mean by starting with who is asking and answering one of the most important questions you'll ever ask, and that is, who am I? And that's a very heavy question for many of us, so heavy that we often ignore it. But we like to make it practical by saying that answering the who am I question is about giving language to how you're uniquely designed. In other words, you're designed in a way that no one ever has been and no one ever will be designed. And you're a one-of-a-kind masterpiece. And we want to give language to what that masterpiece design is. And so why is that important? Why is it important to give language to our design? In the context of leadership, we always say, that the best leader that you'll ever be is one that's authentic to your design. And this applies to you whether you're in a leadership role or whether you're not in a leadership role. We found that when your job or your role matches with your natural design, that's where you flourish. That's where you light up like a Christmas tree. And what we've also found is that when you extend that principle from the leadership or from the individual level to teams, when teams understand their own design, team members understand their own design and understand, respect, and receive how others are designed, not as you want or need them to be, then teams flourish. Trust, collaboration, productivity, those all go up, while conflict, dysfunction, delays in projects, and what you're working on as a team all go down. And the other thing that we have found, the importance of answering this who am I question, is that when you answer that who am I question, it actually unlocks the answers to other existential questions that we all ask. Questions like, why am I here? How should I be living? Where am I going? And what should I be doing with my life? In other words, your design informs your purpose in life. It informs your values, your vision of the future, and what you do on a day-to-day basis. I use a lot of metaphors, so hopefully people will get used to that. I use a metaphor from the animal kingdom to help explain that. So if you're a rhinoceros, you have a certain kind of design, right? So you're a land dweller. You have thick skin. You've got a big horn. You got a keen sense of hearing, bad eyesight, and you're a vegetarian. And just getting that much understanding around your design as a rhinoceros helps you to understand what your purpose is in life. And just as important, it helps you to understand what your purpose isn't. And so many of us are trying to answer that why am I here question. And sometimes just even understanding your design helps you to make sure you don't go down paths that you aren't designed for. So a rhino may look at an eagle flying in the sky. It might see a shark swimming in the ocean. It may admire them and say, boy, I wish I could do that. But the reality is your design as a rhino, as a land dweller, eliminates those kinds of purposes, eliminates your purpose from having anything to do with the sky or the ocean.
Yeah.
And so many of us ask the why question. That may even be where many of us start, starting with why. But the reality is we believe that your design informs what your why is. And I don't hold to the adage that you can be anything you want to be when you grow up. That's just not true. And realizing that truth, that you are uniquely designed for a purpose to solve some unique problem in some unique way, actually is the key to finding your why and living a meaningful and fulfilling life. And I'm sure we'll go into that much deeper in future episodes.
Yeah, I mean, while we're on the subject, I'd love to go just a little bit deeper on that for a minute or two, just around that, the comment you made around, the world kind of saying like, be whatever you want to be, do whatever you want to do, and people looking at success in so many different ways. Why do you feel like it's so important that people truly understand who they are and live from that, as opposed to just looking at other people and comparing themselves?
Yeah, well, I think some of it is, it's not that we can't learn from people or admire other people, but when you start trying to be like somebody else, you actually start getting off course. And when you start embracing who you really are, your design, your identity, it really helps you to stay on track to fulfilling your purpose. And maybe another metaphor is in order here. There's this principle, I think it's the 60 to 1 principle, that says that if you aim for the moon and you're off by just 1 degree, you'll miss it by 4,000 miles. Just being off just that little bit, you're going to miss your target. And so what we believe is by understanding your design, it actually keeps you in your swim lane. It keeps you from going after things that you're just not designed to do. I may aspire to be an NBA basketball player, but I'm 5'9". I'm somewhat athletic, but nowhere near athletic enough to play college or professional basketball. And so if I spent all of my time trying to fulfill a dream of becoming a professional basketball player, that literally is a waste of time. And so what happens is when you start understanding your unique design, you start aligning your life, you start aligning your decisions, you start aligning your career path or what you do in life. Aligned with that, that keeps you on track. It keeps you within the guardrails of what your purpose is in life, what will give you meaning, what will give you fulfillment. But if you start getting off of that, and that's why, it sounds mean to say, well, you can be anything you want to be, right? And I'm not crushing dreams here. I'm actually enabling dreams because we do believe that you are designed for a purpose. And so if you understand your design, you better understand that purpose. And that will help enable your dreams. It'll help enable your purpose and live. At the end of the day, we all want to make the world a better place. And we want to live meaningful and fulfilling lives. At least I do. And so for me, from experience, when I've gotten off track and started doing things that were outside of my design, that's when I was frustrated. I got burned out, did waste time. I can look back now and say, man, if I hadn't gone down that path, I could have been so much further along the path of fulfilling my purpose in life. So that's why it's so important to start with who.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hearing is it's not a complete dismissal of dreams. It's not a complete like saying, hey, never experiment with anything. What I hear is you're inviting people in that discovery journey, inviting people to say you get to uncover your unique design, but pay attention to it in terms of what you might aspire in the future. Pay attention to it in terms of how you parent your kids. Pay attention to it in so many different contexts. So a lot of people will be familiar with Simon Sinek's work, Start With Why. Very successful book, principle that's embraced by a lot of people. How would you articulate the difference between starting with why, starting with who, and how that even has progressed in your mind as you've been kind of living your journey out?
Yeah, I get this question all the time. And the first thing that I always say is that I greatly admire and appreciate Simon Sinek. His Start With Why TED Talk, I think, is one of the top 1, 2, or 3 TED Talks of all time. His book, that TED Talk, The Principles of Starting With Why, have been instrumental in my growth as a person, as a leader, and as an entrepreneur. right out of the gate, I want to honor him and all that he's brought to this space. But the way that I would put it is that I'm building on Simon's foundation. I'm not replacing it. Simon's insights, they're just brilliant, right? Organizations that lead with purpose outperform those that don't, right? I mean, that's the fundamental thesis of starting with why. But here's what I've discovered, right? That through, decades of building companies and coaching leaders, it's that you can't answer the why am I here question. You can't really even start with why until you've actually started with who or answered the who am I question. In other words, purpose without identity is like a house without a foundation, right? So starting with who argues that design and identity is the prerequisite for purpose, not the other way around. And when you know who you are, as we've already discussed, when you give language to your unique design, your purpose is better revealed. When you live aligned with your design, you move with clarity. But when you don't, you burn out, you drift, you can actually miss your calling entirely, as we've already discussed. And the other thing that I've learned that might be a little bit different than what Simon teaches is that we've found that starting with who, that this principle of design not only applies to the individual and to leaders, but it also applies to teams and organizations as well.
Yeah. Lots more to share on that. And I mean, really the purpose of this episode is just give people a basic introduction and kind of whet the appetite for some of these concepts. And we're going to be sharing a lot of practical things, a lot of stories, a lot of tips, a lot of very, very practical tools and things like that throughout the season. But if you're interested in learning more, obviously go to our website, newtoninstitute.com. Rick, how can people get in touch with you on some of the different platforms?
Yeah, well, you can follow me on X. It's at Rick Newton, all lowercase, at Rick Newton 777, or LinkedIn. And I'm going to be starting to post regularly. You're going to start seeing me post more about starting with who. My team is really encouraging me to do that. I've been deep in writing a book called Start With Who. At some point shortly, you'll be able to go to the startwithwhobook.com website. You can either pre-order the book, depending on when you're listening to this, or order the book. And would love to hear from you. Would love to hear your insights and how these principles are affecting you on your journey through life or your leadership journey.
Thanks for joining us today on the Start With Who podcast. If today's episode sparked a question, please drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Please take a moment to rate the show, follow us, and subscribe so you're notified when new episodes are released. And if you'd like to learn more, visit newtoninstitute.com to sign up for our newsletter and explore what's possible when you start with who. Thanks again for being part of this journey. We'll see you in the next episode.